Welcome to Comics and Chronic, everyone. I am one of your hosts, Jake FH. As always, I am joined by Anthony Iannaccio and Cody Willaka Cannon. Today, we have a very special guest on our show. He is a screenwriter, producer, comic book writer. He's written for shows such as My Wife and Kids, Everybody Hates Chris, Marvel's Runaways, Hulu's Wu-Tang, and American Saga, and of course, Adult Swim's critically acclaimed The Boondocks. Please welcome to the show, Rodney Barnes.
Welcome.
What's up, gentlemen? What's happening?
What is up, man? So yeah, I did some research and Killadelphia came up, and that's what we did. That's what we did our 2 episodes ago on was Killadelphia.
Okay. Yes, I heard part of it.
Nice. Yeah. It's awesome. Like we
thank you. Thank you very much.
We're all big fans. So glad we came across it.
I have to say, I love Cody's voice. I want Cody to go on the road with me and open for me and just introduce me to the 7 people that show up at the signings. I want Cody to do my intro.
Dude, I would be honored. Yeah, so we came across your comic. We all loved it. What brought you? I read the foreword where you were like inspired by Hamilton with the twist. How many times have you been to see Hamilton? Because and in the foreword, I think you said like 6.
It's up to about 23 now. Nice. I lost track because the COVID, and they shut theater down, so I haven't been able to go. So I think in the 20s, someplace in the 20s.
That's incredible. By the way, incredible. I love They Live. That's a movie I've seen, and I love that movie.
There you go. I love They Live too. There's so much that I'm wearing They Live. So yeah, I love it.
One of the best fight scenes.
John Carpenter, the Roddy Piper, Keith David. Yeah, that's a great fight.
It's funny that you say. It's funny that you say you want Cody to open for you. He's actually a really good stand-up comedian. So
I have no doubt that voice is a voice. That's a voiceover voice. There's a myriad of things when you hear that voice that you think of. So I'm not surprised at all.
Nice, that's awesome.
Thank you so much.
So there's so much to talk about. Our main focus is of course Killadelphia, but you've been writing comics. You did the run on the Falcon. I did a
short run on Falcon, and then I did Lando Double or Nothing. That was a prequel to the Solo movie. Of what Lando was doing up until that point. Then I do an ongoing book called Quincredible for Lion Forge, Oni Press.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then I do Killadelphia and soon a bunch of others, but yes.
Ooh. Can you tell us about something that might be coming out that...
There is a Killadelphia spinoff that is coming in the months to come. The way Image works, you have to have 3 books in before they will solicit. So I'm working on the 3rd script as we speak. I have one. I've got one hard copy. Jason and I do Nita Hall's Nightmare blog.
Oh, nice.
Jason and I do galleys of the books that we do so we can see what it looks like as a book and not just digitally, because it's still, you want to see how it would feel in the reader's hands and, how it looks.
Killadelphia, especially the paper quality is great. I love how it feels in my hands.
Yeah, Jason, anything that's art-wise or, paper quality or cover, any variant artist, that's all Jason Sean Alexander. He's responsible for all of that.
As soon as I opened Killadelphia, I instantly recognized the art from 30 Days of Night. Did you approach him for a collaboration or?
Jason wanted me to tell you guys he did not do 30 Days of Night. He did Spawn.
Oh.
Ben Templesmith did 30 Days of Night, and Jason was a Spawn artist. He listened to you guys before I listened to you. He said, make sure you tell those guys I'm not Ben Templesmith. But nothing against Ben Templesmith.
Right,
Everybody loves Ben Templesmith. But yeah, he did Spawn. He did a run of Spawn up until now. And I think he still does covers, but I'm not sure.
I'll take responsibility for that. That was my bad.
It's all good. It's all good. Jason lives a mile away from me, or I live a mile away from him. And I got hired to interview him for an art book because he's a fine artist as well as an illustrator of comics. And we sort of hit it off. And every couple of weeks or once a month, we would get together and go to restaurants and talk. And I would pitch him ideas and he would pitch me ideas and we would hate each other's ideas. One night he started, he was drinking whiskey and I was pitching him Killadelphia. And he kept listening. He listened beyond what he usually listens. I could usually tell his eyes glass over and he just wants me to stop talking. But this time he seemed like he was interested in some way. And the next day he called me and he said, you know, that vampire thing you were talking about, have you written it down? And I said, you know, it's in my head and blah, blah, blah. He said, you should write it down. I think we could do that one together. And so he pitched it. I think he pitched it to Image. And the pitch was a pitch that I had given him that it was Sanford and Son meets Hamilton meets Dracula.
Nice.
And he said that was the log line that sort of sold it and got it in. And so there you go. But I always thought his art was perfect for the tone that I was trying to strike. You know, he has an atmospheric, moody kind of quality to his work that that just, even when it's not on the page, there's a tension that's there. There's an eeriness that's there. And I sort of wanted that.
Do you find it to be challenging sometimes working with any artist as far as like their art style or just what they draw for each panel matching what you had in your head when you wrote the script?
No, the way it works with Jason and I just kind of put the information that I want on the page and he decides how he's going to structure it all. Like when I'm doing Marvel work, you know, I sort of describe it like I would on a TV show, like exactly what goes in each panel. But, you know, Jason and I are a little bit looser because I'm such a fan of his work that sometimes I write to what I want to see him draw.
That's nice.
It's like there's a couple, anytime you see a double page spread, that's me wanting like a couple of pages from Jason that I'm eventually going to frame and put on my wall in my office. So there you go.
I really like that working relationship. That's really cool.
Oh, we hate each other on a day. We cuss each other. I mean, Jason has called me every name damn near every name that you could possibly call me. And likewise, I mean, we go through text fights. We had a little text fight this morning. And then we typically make up, like if we fight on a Monday, we'll make up by Wednesday. And then by Saturday, you can feel Monday coming. It's a weird flow to our relationship. But, you know, it's like brothers in a way. Like, you know, I can say what I want to say about it, but nobody else can. So it's a weird thing. So yeah.
I had a specific question and that I was curious about. I was wondering, was Vampire in Brooklyn and or Interview with the Vampire in any way an influence on Killadelphia, especially in regards to John Adams' backstory of becoming a vampire when he goes to the Caribbean?
No and yes. When I first came to Hollywood, Killadelphia has been around for a while in my head. So I came to Hollywood in 1995 from Maryland, and I wrote the movie version that's nothing like, you know, the Killadelphia book now. And I had a really big movie producer who's, if I said his name, you guys would know exactly who I'm talking about, who was interested in buying it. And he said, you know, it's only one problem. There's too many Black people. And he said, if you could take like a third of the Black people out, I think we could make this movie. And I couldn't figure out, it was set in Compton at the time. And I said, well, maybe old Compton, there were more white people. I could add more cops and put up a police station, or we could start in school. I don't know how to add more. And so, you know, it kind of fell apart. He said, you know, if Eddie Murphy couldn't make Vampire in Brooklyn work, I don't think the world really wants to see Black vampires. And that sort of killed it. So no to the Vampire in Brooklyn side. Yes to the Anne Rice side, because I'm a huge Anne Rice fan. And there was a thing that she does with like Memnoch the Devil or Armand, or a lot of her vampires go through time. So you see a little bit of history in the backdrop. It's not like Killadelphia where the history is at the fore. it's in the background. And so when I was reading her books, I was sort of like, what if you kind of flipped it to where history was sort of driving the story, not just vampires witnessing history as sort of being passive observers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I out of the three of us, I'm a huge fan of The Boondocks. It was like came up when I was just out of high school and just like had a huge impact on my life. How was like writing all of these characters like Thugnificent and stuff like that? Did you have the voice actors in mind, like the rappers? Were they an influence in like the character writing or?
Not really, unless it was personal. I think, some of like Carl Jones played some of those characters, and he was actively involved in the creative process. But more often than not, you write the stuff, and in animation in general, unless you're doing like South Park, where the creators are doing the voices, or Family Guy, where the creators doing the voices, you write the stuff and then it's cast to that. So there you go.
What I'm curious to know, because what comics did you grow up reading?
It was weird because I'm older than you guys, so when I first was reading comics, it was for the art, and I loved Neil Adams. And for a while, Neil Adams seemingly was drawing every cover for DC Comics. So, I learned very quickly that sometimes if you did the cover, you didn't do the art on the inside. But those Neil Adams Batmans and Detectives and Green Lanterns and that stuff. And then I had Mike Grell, who was kind of a knockoff Neil Adams, who I love. I love Neil. In fact, I ordered a commission from Mike Grell for the Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes.
Nice. Very nice.
And then it was George Perez and John Byrne on the Avengers / X-Men for John Byrne. And then this weird thing happened with me where I started to not just look at the art, but I actually read the stories deeper. And I think Frank Miller's Daredevil, The Dark Knight Returns, stuff like that got me into them more from a literary place. Neil Gaiman with Sandman and Miracle Man, Alan Moore with Miracle Man and Swamp Thing. It just became like literature to me in a different way. And it sort of was like comics were evolving to a certain place. And then I had a period where, life took over, and I was still going to comic shops every Wednesday, but I wasn't reading as much. I was just buying them just out of habit. And so when I started to write them, there was a big gap in between where the audience was, where I left off, and where they were now. It's like I was really wordy. And it's the funny thing about Twitter is people can tell you exactly what they hate about you. And so I remember the first time, because there was this one guy who hated my Falcon run. And I was in this movie, The Post, with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. And my phone was in my hand because as a writer in Hollywood, someone's always calling you, emailing you about something. So it's a neurotic thing of holding your phone. And my phone kept buzzing. And so I'm looking at my phone and it's Twitter, and it's this guy, and he's killing me. And he's taking pictures of dialogue that he hated and just screen capturing it, putting it up and making commentary. And I'm thinking, my career is over. This is it. I never want to feel this feeling ever again. I want to fight this guy. This is just horrible. But under what he was saying, there was some truth. And he actually did me a favor. And I had to make an adjustment. I was writing to TV. I was writing TV jokes. I wasn't necessarily, the relationship between words and art, I hadn't really established my own voice in doing that. And so I kind of look at Falcon #4 as my first book ever. And those first couple of series were kind of like boot camp. They were sort of like getting me integrated into comics of today and finding my own voice and my own style as to how I want to put a book together.
To jump off that, like that series came right off of Secret Empire, and you even did the one shot for Secret Empire. And that was such I feel like a weird #1 transition for Marvel. And it felt like I read a very interesting article today about Secret Empire, where this writer was talking about how when he first read it, he very much connected with the story, especially Falcon's story of taking up the mantle. But like the way Marvel handled it, they didn't seem like, looking back on it now, because it seemed like Marvel, like Falcon was Cap, and then they just kind of stopped it when it was building up, like, and I loved him as Cap. It was a good change, and like what they did to Steve Rogers was just crazy, like making him Hydra. So, and I felt like for you, I collect comics all the time, so I was ready for what was coming next for Falcon, and I bought that series and I loved it, honestly. And I felt like you were in a tough spot because they changed Falcon so quickly, like
I was, but had I not gotten that opportunity, I wouldn't have figured it out. It's like, I could have been in a better position for me, because I love horror, and I love, and the tone of what I do, I think speaks more to that than
absolutely
mainstream, just superhero comics. Like, I write them, I'm going to keep writing them. But if you ask me what feels natural to me, it's the Killadelphia type stuff and the books that I'm about to do. But, again, I had to learn how it worked. It's one thing to say, oh man, I could write comics, because usually the way that it works is comic writers more often than not would rather go from comics to writing television and film. I'm reverse engineering and going from film and TV back to comics. And having never really done it professionally before, just, the amateur stuff that I had done with my friends and people along the way, I needed the trial by fire. I needed the boot camp. I needed to figure it out and to just jump in, because even though there's pressure in it, that pressure sort of kind of makes you pay attention in a different kind of way. So
I want to ask, how did you transition from writing TV and film to getting into the comic book industry?
I was working on Runaways, and they liked what I was doing, and I made it clear that I wanted to write comics. I was interested in writing comics. And so Marvel Television reached out to Marvel Publishing on my behalf and said, hey, this guy wants to do a book. And they gave me the Secret Empire story, the 10-pager, to get my feet wet, and then offered me Falcon shortly thereafter.
Nice.
And the only thing that was tougher about Falcon for me was he didn't have, other than that Cap persona, he didn't have a definable thing, sort of like Daredevil and Batman and a bunch of other characters who have sort of a thing that they have. He's a soldier. And in that soldiering, you can make him James Bond, you can make him a lot of different things. But unless he's fighting Hydra or he's doing something that's directly related to the larger idea of a bigger thing, it was hard to do nuance and specificity coming off of, like you said a moment ago, he's coming off this big thing of leading the Avengers, and he's Captain America, and he's this, and that's just going to be a regular guy in a hood again. And so it's like making that transition from there to there was sort of a leap.
But I love how you put him up against Blackheart. That's
awesome. I wanted to do something different. And that was the thing I think that sold him on it, was I didn't come with just a small idea that he was going to fight some neighborhood guy, that I wanted him to fight a demon, have a reckoning with himself, and try to go through this metaphysical experience and blah, blah, blah. There are things, again, the hard part for me is, as much as I appreciate it, I wish I was doing it today with what I know now versus what I knew then, which was absolutely nothing.
It almost felt like there was like some DNA of Killadelphia inside of that Falcon story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, for anyone who has a story that they really, really want to tell, even if it's in their subconscious, it comes out in little ways. It comes out, on the edges. And, like I said, I'm glad I went through 2 or 3 series and figured out tone and bumps and bruises and different art styles and different things before I got to Killadelphia. I would have hated for Killadelphia to be the first thing.
I like that.
Nice. That's really cool. So I was, so I noticed that in Quincredible, Quinn's love interest is named Brittany Barnes. Is there a personal relation to that?
There is.
Brittany?
Brittany is my daughter.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was gonna.
And in Falcon, there's a Brianna as well, and both of them are in Killadelphia. And
okay, that's the sisters.
Yeah, so they're sisters, and they're sisters in Killadelphia as well. And it was my attempt to try to get them to read comics. Like my son, he reads comics, and it wasn't like really an effort to get him to read. But my other kids, they have no interest in comic books whatsoever. Oh, that's cool. All right, bye. And, I figured, well, if I put you in it, maybe you would be more interested in actually reading it because, ego and vanity, you're going to say, hey, I'm in it, and take it to school and go, oh, wow, look, I'm in a comic book. Care less. It absolutely care less. The thing she cares about, Brittany does, is there's a T-shirt with her on it. And so, she wears the T-shirt, but she has absolutely no idea. If you say Killadelphia, she said, oh, yeah, my dad writes that book. She has no idea what it's about, why it's there, nothing. I'm disappointed in her.
So which daughter was the younger sister?
Brittany is she was the younger one. I tried it with Brianna first, and she ignored it. So I told her I was never putting her in a book again. And then Brittany was like, yeah, Daddy, put me in one. And I put her in, and then she completely ignored it as well. But Jason draws people so well that when he did this photorealistic thing where he actually took pictures of them and then he made it look exactly like they look, then it was like, wow, I really want to be in this now. Still haven't read it. That's
cool. That's what I was going to ask, if they're actually modeled off of them. Looks
yeah, he did. Cool. He did everything. I try to get them involved in just the creative process with all of it. So it's difficult. It's difficult to get them interested in comics. Kids in general, unless it's a kid book. Like
kids these days.
Kids with Quincredible. More kids will read Quincredible because it looks more like a kid-friendly book. And whereas Killadelphia is kind of heavy and very violent and blah, blah, blah. I would have loved it as a kid, though. But I was
same.
And we were talking about this earlier. Like, you have a way of just inserting humor, even in the darkest story you're telling. It's great.
Thank you. I mean, that came from, again, Lando was mostly comedy. It wasn't your traditional Star Wars fare. And so even in that, and figuring out how to add in a joke without it taking away from the tone of the horror, it's like, I hate funny horror. I hate it in general. You give me Dawn of the Dead, I'm happy. Give me Return of the Living Dead, not so much. And the whole thing is, if I'm laughing too much, I'm not scared anymore. If you're laughing and you're supposed to be scared, you take me out of it. So my thing was, if you can find humor within the scene, cool. If I can put 2 or 3 jokes in there to kind of lighten the mood because I'm ripping off heads and arms and talking about America's dying and, all of these bad things, that somehow the humor gives you a sense of hope and it gives you a sense of something to look forward to.
I feel like sorry, Jake.
Oh, no, you go.
Like a theme I was finding, especially in Quincredible, in your Falcon story, in Killadelphia too, there's I guess the way I summed it up, you have a really great line that in Quincredible, where his parents are talking to him after they find out, he's got powers. And they tell him, saving the world's a matter of perspective. Everyone has a point of view of how the world should be, of who's the bad guy. Helping the world become better is the best thing we could do, but you have to have a good idea of what needs changing, not just listen to your frustrations. And I felt like throughout your stories, I really felt that in a lot of the characters, like in Killadelphia. I felt that with Seesaw in a way, and in Quincredible, of course, but in Falcon, I felt like he was trying to instill that in Patriot. I don't know. Am I off on that?
No, you're pretty much on. I mean, I think again, I'm old enough to remember when you had those Dirty Harry movies that I loved as a kid, where he's basically anybody who wasn't a cop or a white guy was a bad guy, and there were no lines drawn as to why. They had one, I think it was in Magnum Force, where the Black Panthers were kind of like bad and Harry had the gun and he had to go and talk to him. And they were sort of maligned as just being against society. And there was no balance as to how they were portrayed to say why they were doing the things that they were doing. And I think with any antagonist, if you can give them a plausible reason as to why they're doing what they're doing, they're not just bad,
Right.
They have a perspective that they think. It's like the Sith and the Jedi. It's like the Sith have a point of view and the Jedi have a point of view. And those two just don't kind of mesh. And I think if you look at, unless it's just crime, unless I'm murdering somebody or killing somebody and something like that. But when you talk about ideology, ideology comes down to a matter of perspective. If you, regardless of where you come from, there are people who do really heinous things in the name of believing that they're doing the right thing.
Right.
And they really don't typically get a voice when you have a protagonist that's trying to stop them from doing something. You just look at the behavior. But under the behavior, there's a logic that's there on both sides that could be explored. And to me, because people rarely do that in stories, I think you have.
I agree.
Now. It's like, say that, a lot of the guys they're guys who sell drugs that are selling drugs because there's no infrastructure in their community. Right. And that's the only form of commerce. And that's the only form and way of taking care of your family and feeding your family. And, the larger idea of America may look down on them and say, oh my God, you're a drug dealer, you need to go to jail. But you put yourself and you have some empathy for that guy and you look at his community and he's like, hey, I'm taking care of my family. I'm putting a roof over my head. I'm not killing anybody. I'm not stealing anything. And I'm not justifying, any of that stuff. All I'm saying is I'm empathetic to people who aren't as fortunate as people who don't have to do that thing. So being able to add perspective to, the conversation when you're telling a story, to me, adds a dimension to it. Sometimes it's a little bit more fair.
Yeah. And that's a breath of fresh air for comics. I'll say, sorry, Jake, I feel like I'm talking too much. I'll say one more thing that like the story doesn't, a lot of your stories don't just, it doesn't, the hero or the protagonist is trying to find a way to solve the conflict without violence. It's always like, it seems through forgiveness more than likely.
Yeah, and it feels like when the violence comes, it's usually coming from an emotional place, not just from, I got to stop the bad guy thing. If you look at Killadelphia, typically somebody's really angry, like Jupiter or Abigail, or, there's Toppy, it's like, I'm really angry, or someone has hurt me and I really haven't gotten past the trauma of the past, which is what Killadelphia is about. The whole book is about trauma. But, it comes from a place that I think is more natural to where I think, where I think anger and rage and violence comes from. I don't think it just comes from, I want to hurt you. I think it comes from a lot of subconscious places in us where, I see stories sometimes where people will rob somebody, and even after they've gotten the purse, they'll beat the shit out of them, and it's like, there's something beyond just a desire for money or just a desire for the thing that is driving them to be even more mean-spirited.
Right. That's not justice at all.
Yeah, that's not just, there's no way, like, I can't absolve that, but there's something going on in that individual. And I think there's something in America sometimes that is really, really angry and doesn't, and I look at anger as being really corrosive. And, people who wrestle with anger, and I think to lesser or greater degrees, most people do, but to those who aren't aware of their anger, they do things sometimes that they may not be conscious of. And in that lack of consciousness, you could do all types of things that in your better mind, you might not do. So
I have to ask, just because of earlier when you had explaining the situation about a drug dealer. Are you a fan of The Wire at all? Did you watch The Wire?
I'm a fan of The Wire. I come from that part of the world. I come from Annapolis.
Oh, yeah, it's Baltimore. You're from Maryland.
Yeah, and I lived in Baltimore. I went to high school my last year in Baltimore. Fathers in Baltimore, brothers and sisters there now. I'm a big fan of The Wire. I think seasons 3, 4, 1, 2, and 5 is how I go.
That's exactly how I would rank it.
Yeah,
I'm serious. I'm so serious.
Yeah. And I'm also a fan of Homicide: Life on the Street, which I look at as The Wire Junior, like right before The Wire, which was still my favorite TV show of all time.
Or The Corner. Did you watch The Corner?
I watched The Corner, but The Corner was so depressing. It's like The Corner was so sad.
It was sad.
There was everybody took an ass whipping on The Corner. And there was no like light at all. But for the other two, and I like, it's funny, like even in Killadelphia, there's a version of Killadelphia that could be like The Corner, to where it's just sadness every week. But I try to, like The Wire, there are different class distinctions. It's like you have the people who are on the street, and you have the vampires who are kind of mindless that just kind of devour people and do what they do. But then you have this elite thing sort of explaining in very eloquent terms why they do what they do and how the world works. And I think for me, that's what I appreciate more than anything else, because like I said, it's hard to get it's easy to get lost in despair, but I got enough depression to wrestle with to watch some more depressed.
I did have a question, especially tagging on to the comment about the elites. I was wondering, is John Adams, okay, sorry, let me try to word this correctly. Him turning a lot of the residents of Philadelphia, especially like urban Philadelphia, into vampires, was that an analogy for like, I don't know, like white politicians out of touch who, through their policies, maybe sucking the life out of like inner city communities?
No, you're not too far away from what I was thinking. Mine was more of, there's a 99% and there's a 1% in America, and the lower you get within the framework of that 99%, you get to people who don't really have a voice. And I look at John Adams as someone who would look at those people and want to build an army, because there's something within them that once they get power and the perspective that comes with immortality, they would feel something within themselves that would make them a little more loyal to him, and sort of see the benefit of his ideology. More so than trying to get the elite, because the elite already live elite lives. They've already got money, they've already got power, they already have all of the stuff that as human beings of a certain mindset think is really important in life. But the people who have nothing only have what they have and dream of having more, and he's sort of giving them everything. He's taken away the need. I mean, certainly for people of color, Black people. Since slavery, I think there's a foundational reset of survival. How do I survive? Because there aren't a lot of resources in inner cities. There's not a lot of infrastructure. So you're always thinking about, even hip hop talks about it sometimes, I got more money than you, I have more this, or I have more that. And everything's about what I have, my ability to hold on to what I have, and those types of themes. What happens when there's no need for any of that? What happens when survival has been taken off the table and I'm going to be immortal from this point forward? I'm stronger than anything that could hurt me. I'm immortal. You can't really do a drive-by and kill me. Cops can't come by and rough me up. I don't need public assistance. I don't need a job. I don't need any of those things that typically I fought for my entire life and have watched generations of people fight for before me. It's really a matter of, obtaining blood. But what I try to put with my vampires is, if I have immortality, I still have a desire for purpose. Why am I here? And I hadn't seen that before. And, I'm a huge fan. I go back to the Universal monsters and, Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Nosferatu before that, and the Hammer films with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and the Anne Rice ones you spoke of, and Salem's Lot, and a myriad of vampires in between. And to lesser or greater degrees, they all just want blood. You know, Near Dark had a kind of cool thing where they traveled around in a van, and Dusk Till Dawn, they were in a bar. But for the most part, they still just want blood, and they want to be spooky. And I wanted to add something to it to where I have to do something more with my existence than just blood. I think I have Seesaw on the line saying, you know, I scrambled for money when I was a person, and now that I'm a vampire, I'm scrambling for blood, and I'm more than that. So the idea was just to kind of evolve past that general idea, because, you know, when people say, oh my God, another vampire story, the hardest thing to do to get people to read it is because people think another vampire story.
Right.
Yeah.
What could you do that's different in a vampire story? And I'm like, well, I try to do a bunch of things that are different. And, you know, so there you go.
You were mentioning all of the vampire stories that you've talked about, and you mentioned Salem's Lot, which is like one of my favorite vampire stories. And honestly, your Vampires in Killadelphia, if there was any like vampire lore that it reminded, they were those two, like I didn't think of it until you mentioned it just now, have a little bit of overlap. Were they a big part of your like lore for what the vampires did?
Yeah, Stephen King in general. I mean, I think the way Stephen King wrote, I was a stand-in on the movie The Green Mile because I really wanted to meet Stephen King, not so much that I look anything like Michael Clark Duncan. I don't think they knew that though.
No way.
I don't think they knew. They could tell the difference. It was like,
Oh my God.
he's big and black, I'm big and black. You know, I just wanted to meet Mr. King, and I did. And he was very, very gracious in everything I wanted a hero to be. But Salem's Lot is one of those books that I've read and listened to, because I listen to audiobooks now because I don't have a lot of time, over and over and over and over again. And I would be lying if I didn't say the tone of how he presents the humanity of his vampires doesn't influence the way that I sort of do the same, because in Salem's Lot, you just have this community, you know, then you have the Marston house, and then you have, you know, the vampire comes to town, but you get to know all of these people first. And they have, you know, these messed up relationships. And then slowly when they become vampires, somehow the nature of the relationship is influenced by the vampire. It's not just about the vampire coming to suck the blood. He's also sort of corrupting the nature of what you thought the relationship was. And I do the same thing. I do it more from a soap opera place between father and son, because they're the ones that have to go back and forth in their relationship. But, you know, the same thing with Abigail and John and Seesaw and his grandmother, and any of the vampires that talk, for the most part, have some form of a human relationship that they're wrestling with and trying to overcome, because I'm sort of interested in that as well.
Can I ask, I find it unbelievable that you haven't written, like Marvel has not approached you for like a Blade series?
No, I even asked it one time, but I think that
Nice.
the way that I think, and maybe one day the opportunity will present itself, and because Blade was the first job I had in Hollywood when I lived in my car. I lived in my car for like a year, and I had worked on movies and TV shows back on the East Coast, and I'd made relationships, and I got called to do the Blade movie. And I really didn't know who Blade was. I knew who Dracula was, but I didn't know who Blade was. And I remember buying the comic book before I got the job on the first day, the Blade and Dracula intro. Got it out at, I think it was, which comic book? Golden Apple on Melrose. At the time, it was further in on Melrose. It wasn't as far down on Melrose as it is now. And I learned who he was, and it was a great movie. And I'm actually in it for a hot second because in the Blood Club, all the extras, as soon as you dump blood on them, started running out of the room. And my job was to be the big security guard that would stop them from running out of the room. But all of that to say, love Blade. One day hope to play in the Blade world. But any of the Marvel or DC horror comics, I love Swamp Thing more than anything else in the world. I love that there's a connection, a thing that they do every once in a while. Alan Moore had a run during his run when he did vampires. They were vampires underwater, I think.
Oh, well, aquatic vampires.
Yeah, they do because they didn't need air. They needed blood, and they would come out and like fish, and they would bite people and then disappear to this city underwater like Atlantis, like a dead Atlantis. It was kind of a cool story.
That's sick.
I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
I kind of want to read that.
I think it's issues 38 and 39. I could be wrong. Of Saga of the Swamp Thing. But DC does this thing with Batman and Swamp Thing where they team up sometimes to battle monsters, things. And I had a story for that type of team up. I mean, I'm sort of in this place where comics, you don't come to comics to get rich. So for me, it's the purity of writing to that part of me that's still innocent. Like, movies and TV shows, there's so much interference with what you finally see, what you have in your head and what ends up on TV. Very rarely are they the same thing. But with comics, it's sort of close, unless like one of the big two has an agenda for how they want to present a certain character. Certainly with Image and independent comics, nobody has ever told me no to anything.
That's awesome.
I had to hire an editor to come in and, to look at my stuff and make sure that, I'm hanging in there and doing the right thing. But so, yeah.
I do have a question. Toppy from Killadelphia is his look based off of like the classic, Baba Legba or Baron Samedi look from
a little bit Baron. I wanted, it would have been very easy, especially when I'm dealing with characters of color, to all make them sort of the same thing. And I wanted Adams to have like his own kind of guard that he had fashioned over the course of time. And I wanted everybody to come from a different era, which would give me selfishly as a writer, different periods of time to sort of play in. So I'm not just dealing with slavery, I'm dealing with the Civil War, dealing with Reconstruction, World War I, World War II, the 70s, just different people that, because I'm dealing with time, that Adams has bumped into on his journey of being a vampire, so that I'm kind of keeping time, the idea of time present in the story. So really Jason was the one that said, what if he was like an Undertaker, or something like that? And immediately I went to like Undertaker in the WWE. and so, since he had the hat, he had all of the stuff, and I worked on the show American Gods. And, Mr. Ibis being that guy who not only keeps the records and all of that, but is sort of like the Undertaker. I was like, how about if I did a play on that and a look that kind of went that? He was a man of distinction. That's the hat. So, yeah.
Because I was wondering if I was getting Serpent and the Rainbow vibes. Wes Craven's.
Love Serpent and the Rainbow. That's a great reference.
I do too.
I love want to hear you scream.
What's his name? Zakes.
Zakes McCowie or something.
Yeah,
I think
Zakes McCowie or something.
I think he's no longer with us at this point, but it's Bill Pullman.
Bill Pullman.
We're gonna torture the only white guy in this movie. Yeah, well, no black. He did live, but he went through some shit along the way. But I was one of my favorite Wes Craven movies.
Me too. I saw it when I was like freshman year of college. I'd never seen it before, and I was like, oh man, this is cool.
Oh, I loved it. I loved the way it was shot. Because the people under the stairs was fun, but it made no sense to me.
I love that movie.
It made absolutely no sense to me.
You're right. It made no sense, but God, if it didn't scare the shit out of me.
Shocker. I think it was Shocker. It was another one about a deadly friend. I think it was like this robot thing that was coming after you. Then there was Deadly Blessing about Amish people That sort of was scary. That was the first Wes Craven movie I saw.
Ooh, Amish vampires?
No,
Are you going to write
just,
that next?
Yeah, that would be fun. Then it was the Freddy movies in between. Freddy was like the top. Freddy, blew the ceiling off of everything. But, so yeah, Serpent and the Rainbow after Freddy, I think, is my favorite Wes Craven movie. But
is there any horror movies from like maybe the past few years that you've been a huge fan of?
I dig the Blumhouse stuff. I think in comparison to the torture porn horror stuff, I was never really a big fan of that.
Saw.
I like the first Saw. But then as the Saws went on and the Hostels went on, and it's like, how mean can we be to a human being?
Hostel was so tough to watch.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to how can I grind up a human being and do bad things? But The Conjuring, there's another series, Insidious.
Did you watch Hereditary at all?
I didn't see Hereditary yet. I've heard things about it. I have no idea what Insidious is about. I have no idea with any of the. I've watched them all. I have no idea what it's about. Like Annabelle and all of them. The Jordan Peele ones don't feel like classic horror to me. They're more like Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But as far as like The Conjuring, going into a spooky, a haunted house or those types of things, that speaks to my Kolchak the Night Stalker, that type of thing.
There's like an ongoing joke, like for whatever reason, whenever we bring up a movie, I haven't seen it, but for some reason I've seen The Night Stalker. I don't know.
Yeah, Patrick Reynolds just did a commission. I don't know if I can reach it over here with the character from my new series and Kolchak together, because they kind of do a similar thing. I'll see if I can reach it before we get off. But yeah, I love Kolchak. The first two movies of the week, written by the late great Richard Matheson. Best thing as a kid that saved. I had a rough childhood of sorts, more emotionally than anything else. But in between, it was some really cool vampire stuff. And Richard Matheson is probably the reason I'm not a serial killer to this day.
Okay.
That's awesome. I had to ask, so is Killadelphia, are you gonna make it into a show?
Yeah, I've written a pilot. It's been optioned. I think we're attaching directors and talent and stuff to it now.
Nice. Like Phil Morris, right? As James Sangster Sr.?
We'll see. It's a group. It's sort of a group decision as to who gets cast and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm very, very happy with the pilot. I mean, I think it's probably the best script I've ever written in the form that it's in now. And I'm hoping. I mean, I think when you're a fanboy and you grow up loving this stuff and you think to yourself, man, if I ever get the shot to do that thing that I've always wanted to do, Killadelphia is sort of that for me. But I got to convince other people that it would be the right thing for the rest of the world. So we'll see.
Oh, man. I feel like that should not be a hard sell. It's so amazing. Come on.
I hope it's not on me. I would have it on TV this fall if I could. I mean, I think it's just a matter of finding the right home and people, people responding the way that you guys responded, that I respond. I think there's a place for it. I think in the pantheon of all this television that we see right now, that's different, but logic isn't necessarily why they make TV shows.
Who in your ideal world would you cast, at least as, let's say, I don't know, John Adams and then the Sangsters?
I would love, this will never happen, but if Paul Giamatti.
Yes, what I said. That's what Jake said.
That would be fantastic. It'll never happen. So if anybody's listening to this and saying, wow, he's thinking Paul Giamatti, I'm just saying what I would like. And if Andre Braugher could be Sangster Sr., only because I love the Frank Pembleton character from Homicide. And as I was writing him, I was thinking Frank Pembleton without a soul. Because the Frank Pembleton character from Homicide had issues with his faith. He was a Catholic who didn't understand why the world was moving in a direction that it was moving in. And Sangster's just hardened by everything that he's seen. And it's just made him cold. And ironically, being dead is bringing back his humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So
Jake said that too.
I said that too. I said I loved that, like, especially with the relationship between him and his son, of which you said in the beginning that like it was strained. I love that he was more human when he was dead, especially when you think about like classic vampire lore and they're devoid of all emotion and humanity. And then that their relationship was reconstructed or, made stronger. Yeah. That was awesome.
And that sort of, thank you. That sort of came from when my father died. I didn't meet my father until I was 17, 18 years old. I'd seen him a couple of times through life, but we didn't really have a relationship. And I went to live with him when I was 17. And it was like being with a stranger, even though we had the same DNA. And then we went through a long period of not talking at all, and he passed away. And I always wondered, if we had more time, would that have changed the nature of our relationship? And I don't think that time necessarily is the healer of emotional trauma. I think it's really work that it takes to make that work. And so the Sangsters, one of them has all the time in the world because, he's dead. But both of them have sort of made a commitment to work together. And, I always, that's the hope that's in the series. That's the part that's the anti pulling off arms and ripping off heads.
It is really well done. And that's what I noticed too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is Hell Hall a real place in Philadelphia?
No. I always wanted when I thought about doing a urban vampire series, I wanted like like Dracula has his castle, Dracula's castle in Transylvania. And I wanted to use classic vampire stuff. Hell Hall was going to be my Dracula's castle. I'm sure there's a big Victorian building, or there's a big housing project, or there's a big something that you could shoot and make it look ominous. But that was basically what it was. It was a playoff of trying to find a Dracula's castle.
That's cool. I never even thought of that.
And in Salem's Lot 2, at the Marston House, in the basement, there's this cool scene in the miniseries where near the end, and I love the way even in the book he describes it, where all of the people you've gotten to know from the neighborhood are sort of crawling out, coming after Ben Mears. And that's sort of where, and when Sangster's in Hell Hall and he's coming home, or so to speak, you see the vampires hanging upside down.
Hanging.
They're all over the place. It's like those are the citizens of North Philadelphia now in this new construct of what their futures will be. So,
oh man,
that was inspired by that.
Very cool.
So the official name for Killadelphia fans is Killadites.
Well, I've heard there's so many plays on the Killadelphia name. I remember there's two groups of people. There's the group of people that say, man, Killadelphia, that's so cool. Or, man, Killadelphia, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard before. There's two groups. And so when it comes to names of what the fans will be, for 3 days in a row, I heard Killadites. So when I put that afterward at the end of at issue 12, Killadite was on my mind. So I called them all Killadites.
Nice.
So rather little fan base though.
We're trying to find a name for our small fan base. We don't know what to call our fans yet.
Yeah.
We'll come up with something. I'm sure. Or Codeines, like for Cody. Codeines or something.
Oh, Cody.
Codeines. We'll come up with something. Because, codeine, the chronic thing, codeine, is a thing.
Awesome. So I noticed two similarities between Quincredible and I didn't finish Quincredible, but Quincredible and Killadelphia. And that is interracial relationships, specifically with Sangster Jr., and then when Brittany Barnes introduced her boyfriend to Quinn.
Yeah, I think I'm not responsible for that one in Quincredible. She just drew him that way.
Oh, okay.
I had nothing to do with that one. The one with Sangster Jr., she's Cuban. And so, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't something that I said, we need diversity in relationships. They could be, if this ever becomes a TV show, who knows what the ethnicities will be. The Sykes will be Black, and John Adams and Abigail will be white. Everybody else, who's this? Seesaw will probably be Black too, but everybody else, who knows what they'll be.
Cool. Yeah, I was wondering if that was from a real life influence.
Nah.
Okay.
So speaking of TV, did you watch WandaVision?
I watched the first couple. I haven't had time because the show that I'm writing and producing starts shooting soon. So we're in pre-production and there's a lot going on right now. So it's hard to sit and actually, warrant without guilty pleasure of sitting and watching television. It's a hard thing to do right now.
May I ask, is that show the Lakers documentary or is that done?
No, it's not a documentary. It's a scripted show.
Oh, okay.
It's a huge show. And I'm actually acting in it, which was not my choice. Someone thought, hey, we could use Rodney. I'm the head of Laker security. I haven't backed out quite yet. We start shooting in mid-April. So we were supposed to shoot a year ago, but COVID kind of shut everything down. And now we're ramping back up. And, so there's that. I'm doing the Oscars this year.
Oh, wow.
I'm doing, I have a Tiger Woods miniseries. I'm looking at my board. I have a Tiger Woods miniseries. Trying to get Killadelphia off the ground. I have a show, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable, based on an animated series at HBO Max. We can't say the name yet. The Lakers show. I have a monster movie with New Regency that I have to get written pretty quickly because they're mad. I have what else? I have another movie.
Man.
And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 comic books that I'm writing at the same time.
Holy moly.
So
shit.
All of that's sort of happening at the same time. And there are these moments where it all converges, and I'm no fun to be around when all of that happens.
Can we honestly just say thank you for taking the time to talk to us?
No,
after hearing all that,
you're very welcome. This is sort of a welcome reminder that there's life outside of being in this room, hunched over a laptop or a pad with a pen.
So I have a personal question. I like to write. Not comic books by any means, but comic book characters that I come up with, my own universe. Mm-hmm. I came up with a villain.
Do you do this high? Because I see the smoke at the same time. Is this something like you hit a thing and you say, you know what? I'm coming up with a character right now. I feel creative.
I mean, yeah, so that too. Okay, or sometimes it just goes. So I came up with a character named 5G, who I want to ask your advice on this. And so what I want to do is that he's either there was a shootout near a 5G cell phone tower between 5 different factions of gangs. Mm-hmm. And so, but the 5G
sounds like a math
tower,
equation. It sounds like a math problem that I'm working up, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm terrible at math, so you don't have to worry about that.
5G.
The tower falls on them and irradiates them, but fuses them into one. So it takes 5 gangsters and puts them into one. That's why he's 5G.
I tell you what. This is my advice.
Okay.
I say write it, then go to sleep. When you wake up the next morning and if you look at it again and it makes sense, keep going.
It's a good thing I didn't tell you about any of my other characters.
Anytime you have to describe your characters with your hands, it's usually a journey that's, is fraught with peril. Whenever you say, look, so there's this dude, like he can't swim, but the bad guys are in water and he really wants to get him. It's like you're using your hands to explain the story. It's like, that's always bad. And people do it with me all the time. Look, man, I got this idea. You're going to love this. And it's like, and I just look at your hands and I want to order pizza.
Oh man, all right. I'm super glad I asked that question.
Yes. By all means. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
Wait, what if he makes 5G a vampire?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know,
and he can suck the 5G out of the Ethernet in the air.
Now you're just going left. Now it's just, you know, when you left it at 5G, you left it up to me to interpret however I wanted it. I could go from there. And now when you're adding
I killed it. I killed it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
when you add a second act to it, now I'm like, okay, now he's just wasting my time now.
We don't want to do any more of that. So I guess on that note, thank you so much for coming out. It was really cool of you to.
But yeah, we were talking about the edibles, and I promised someone that I would say,
oh yes,
justmarrydelivery.app is the place to go for a myriad of things that, you know, as far as cannabis and all of that is consumed. But I personally get gummies so I can go to sleep, because if I start thinking anytime after 9:30, I won't sleep for days. So I need to be able to sleep. So there you go.
Thank you so much for
you guys look like you could sleep really easy. Cody can sleep easy. I wish.
That is so true.
I wish I could be Cody. If I could come back and be Cody for a day. When I heard Cody's voice, Cody reminded me of the kid that would like mess with me on the playground, but be my friend at the same time. You know, it was a weird kind of protecting thing, but he would still like, you know, be the one that would antagonize me and then protect me at the same time from other kids. So I need him, but I don't necessarily want him. It's a weird.
Yeah, that's kind of how we feel about him on the podcast.
He's the live wire. He's the guy that comes in. He's the closer.
He's the looks. He's the looks of the show.
Yeah, he's got a thing. He's the guy. It's like, yeah, we got us, but we got Cody too. Got Cody.
It should just be Comics and Cody, honestly, at this point.
Well,
right?
Hey, Comics and Cody. Y'all can. I don't want anything. You know. It's great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. When do we expect Volume 2 of Killadelphia to come
Volume 2, I think it's March the 31st. I think in 2 weeks.
After my birthday.
Volume 2 will be here, and it's a beautiful book. I'm not saying it just because I had something to do with it, but all the variant covers that whatever Jason does, I don't even want to know, to get these artists to come in and do covers for us. It's a gallery in the back beyond the story. There's just...
Yeah,
it's great stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and every issue is constantly sold out. It's so hard to get that issue if it's not any issue of Killadelphia. If it's not added to your pull list, is what I'm saying. That's how you get this book.
Yeah, I went to 4 comic book shops in LA. Managed to find you at the Comic Bug on Overland. Shout out to them.
Earth 2 on Sherman Oaks. Carr and those guys who I go to,
nice.
They've got a bunch that I think I signed. It's like 10 or 15 of them that are still there. So
nice.
Number ones. So if you want them, there they go.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming
so
on
much.
Welcome, guys. You guys
awesome.
take it easy. I hope I get to talk to you soon, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Rodney Barnes,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take it easy. Cody, you be good.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
You too. Thank you.
Hi, you're listening to Comics and Chronic, and I'm Jacob H.
I'm Cody Cannon.
And I'm Anthony Iannaccio.
And you can tune in every Thursday to hear new episodes of Comics and Chronic.
And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Comics and Chronic. That's Comics, the letter N, Chronic.
We'll see you guys next week.
Woo!
Peace.